Welcome to Sikhcast, brought to you by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.
This episode is from a live webinar recording that originally aired on October 10th. The webinar focuses on the Sikh Research Institute's new initiative, the Guru Granth Sahib Project, aiming to make Gurbani more accessible to a contemporary audience. Ishmeet Kaur will get us started by introducing today's panelists.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for joining today's webinar hosted by the Sikh Research Institute. Now, I would like to introduce you to today's presenters. First, we have Harinder Singh. Harinder Singh is an educator and thinker who is deeply in love with one force, the oneness that radiates in all. He currently serves as the Senior Fellow, Research and Policy at the Sikh Research Institute. His current focus is on unveiling the message of the Guru Granth Sahib to global populations and developing critical thinking in Sikh institutions. He currently resides in the United States with his wife and 2 children. Dr. Ishmeet Kaur teaches at the Center for English Studies at Central University of Gujarat. She works on areas related to the literature of margins, social movements, and studies of violence and trauma. Her recent work has been on violent studies, engaging with discourses on women and violence and the 1984 anti-Sikh carnage in Delhi. Jasleen Kaur is a WVA grad in religious studies, focusing on South Asian religions through the lens of literature and poetry. She's currently working as a researcher with Sikhi. She also loves singing in her free time, whether on stage or for her friends. She hopes to eventually go back to school in pursuit of a PhD in either religious ethnography or history, and fulfill her dream of teaching and learning from others. And lastly, we have Dr. Jaswant Singh. He is a scholar in Sikh studies. His immense love for Gurbani propels him to read, reflect, research, and share Gurbani's wisdom and understanding with a broader community. He currently serves as the Director of Gurbani Research at the Sikh Research Institute. He holds a master's degree in religious studies and a doctorate in the linguistics of Guru Nanak Bani. He currently lives in Faridabad in Haryana, India, with his family. Thank you to all of you for joining me today. As I've engaged with this project, I've thought about the other translations of the Guru Granth Sahib that I've engaged with throughout my studies, but also at the Gurdwara. I'm sure when I was younger, I would see Sikhi to the max displayed on a PowerPoint presentation, which was new because when I was very, very little, that wasn't something that would happen. But as I grew into high school, that's something that was normalized at the Gurdwara, but it still didn't feel like something I could engage with. As I went into my studies in university, I tried to find translations that I was comfortable with. I would look at the author, I would kind of, see what kind of engagement was happening with the text, and it was never something I was comfortable using. Oftentimes it wasn't something I was comfortable using. I also don't read Gurmukhi or Panjabi, so it was another element was added that made it difficult for me. And as I was writing my thesis this summer, I was writing it for people who aren't in the community. So I wanted the translations to be something that would explore the depth and the beauty and the complexity of the text. And it wasn't always possible to find an English translation that would do that. So to start this conversation off, Harinder Singh, and I'm sure this is something others have struggled with as well. Harinder Singh, as the project lead, reviewer, and the English commentator, could you give us a little bit of insight into what the push for this project was, what's included in this project, how it's different from others, and why has the term project been used as opposed to any other term, especially when we're engaging with a translation or a transcreation of a large body of religious text?
Sure, Guru Fateh, everyone. So what Manvinder is asking, I am going to present 2 angles to it. The first is the word project itself. Look, the word project implies that this will be an evolving process. There is no completion. The only completion is of the Guru Granth Sahib itself, which the Guru gave it to us. Everything else is to learn about it at different levels and different eras and different mechanisms, methodologies. So the project implies that the completeness and perfection is in the Guru itself. Rest is everything which is available to us as people, as resources, utilizing those aptitudes, those tools to make sense of it for today's audience, for ourselves, as well as for the audience we are engaged with. So that's why it's a project. It'll be a continuous process. Even after this team leaves, someone else should take this on. Other reason the word project is being used, so this is really, think of it as being, we are trying to come up with a database of everything of Guru Granth Sahib, which means every word needs to be understood in its multifaceted ways. And if we understand every word, maybe we can bring together the words and perhaps understand what the intended meaning was, and perhaps then create a lived experience out of it. So project has an element of technology these days, that in addition to the research on each word, we are also going to create sort of a database of Guru Granth Sahib. So the collective knowledges before us can be made available, and the current knowledges which we are trying to develop can also be available for people to decide how to best connect with the Guru. The vision of the project essentially, the idea started about 3 years ago. I mean, I grew up asking for translations. I remember going to folks in Punjab who I thought were the best qualified ones to do this. And last 20 years, can we please start this? Can you please do this? And eventually then we convinced our board at Sikhi, look, this needs to happen. The last serious effort was a century ago, the first serious effort to do this in Punjab. And then the last ones are continuing, but they have been in individual capacities. We need to treat this as a research project, which then engages with technology to avail the collective knowledges for the world. So that's what we are after.
Thank you. Yes, I think that was also an important angle for me as a researcher in my academic life. I think elements were brought into this project that I really appreciated. Ishmeet Kaur, I'm gonna give this next question to you as the English transcreator and commentator, and the transcreation. We'll get to that word later. But yeah, more of a general question for you. What were some understandings that you had of the Guru Granth Sahib that perhaps changed while you were working on it, while you started working and while you were working through it?
Yeah, that's a good a question I think about a lot. I think I'm similar to you, where I grew up not having that understanding of Bani because there was a language barrier. And I think it's like fair to say that even Sikhs who have an understanding of like Panjabi are going to feel that the text is far away because it's not written only in Panjabi. And there's a lot of like contextualization that you can't get when you're just looking at like a couple of lines of translation on the screen. I think a lot of the translations I remember growing up with were like heavy on the Lord and the God and the Master and the like Father. And I think as a child, I was kind of like, it's not for me. I was like 5-6 years old learning like Japji Sahib, for example, and reading the translations as a child, I felt like it was quite far away from me. And I think that was a thing that carried through well into my like young adult life. So now like I'm 26, I've been working on the project with this team for a while now, like a year-ish. And in that time and I think we all would echo this, to be honest, but like in that time, my relationship with Bani has like changed drastically. Because I think for a long time I was like, well, that's just a thing that I will listen to on Sundays. I'll listen to people singing certain shabads and try to get a sense of what the shabad means, and I'll listen to it and maybe I'll be moved by it and maybe I won't, but it's not a thing that I thought about throughout the week. And so much of what this project has done has made even the idea of sitting with Bani and like trying to understand it so much less daunting. Because I'm not saying that like I got it now, like I get it's all good, but now I'm thinking about it and I'm feeling like the way that it changes how I deal with like stuff in my own life, how I deal with processing the many events happening all the time in the world around us. And I think like that sort of far away, daunting sort of idea that I had about like who gets to engage with Bani and who gets to feel like it's changing them and it's something they're walking with, that has totally been flipped. for me. And I hope that with this project, that like accessibility and that sort of slow interaction with and engagement with Bani is something that a lot of people who didn't feel like they could have that now. I feel like now they can, and I hope that they take a stab at it. I hope they explore it a little bit, because I think having that slow relationship and sort of dialogue with it is a thing that I never felt was possible. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think I relate to that a lot. It's definitely the less daunting part, and also the who gets to relate to it. Definitely is something I can relate to. If you don't mind, I'm going to push you a little bit. Would you mind, if you're comfortable, sharing an example of maybe a way that your relationship with a certain body or a piece of the text has changed as you've engaged with the project?
Yeah, no problem. Always happy to be pushed. I think with Asakibar, which was the first Bani we worked on, I had never engaged with that Bani before. Like, I had heard it sung. I had never really looked into the translations. And I remember, like, in the commentary meetings where we were discussing each 40 and the points that were being made, every time I was like, wow, this is so smart. This is so relevant, which is like, of course, yes, Bani is timeless. But I felt myself, this is a year ago, I felt myself very much like walking with those ideas, because Guru Granth Sahib talks about like corruption, hypocrisy, the political and the spiritual or the religious, and how they're intertwined. And so much of that is playing out around the globe. It has been forever, but I think I've become more aware of it as I've grown up, especially in the United States and like India. And so I think like that was a big thing for me in helping me just like process the world around me and not feel utterly helpless about it or hopeless. And then a more like personal thing that I've found is that in Bani's like Kuchaji and Suchaji and Gunwanti, where Guru Nanak Sahib uses this voice of the human bride in all of her kind of iterations, right? The one who has no virtues or is virtueless or is ungraceful versus the one who's kind of inculcated those virtues. I always felt like that was such a harsh way to think about one's relationship with Ikonkar. And as a kid, I always read those like soul bride translations and was like, nope, not reading it. Like something isn't sitting right about this with me. And just kind of like unpacking the context of those Banis and why that like symbolism is used as a vehicle to make those points has made me, I think, a lot more vulnerable in my seeking, if I can say that. Like, there's so much vulnerability in those Banis, and a lot of times I think we beat ourselves up about not feeling connected all the time. And I'm going through it. People go through it all the time. And I think that like kind of reassurance in the form of having a larger sort of understanding of those Banis and like thinking with them has helped me in my own like personal Sikhi journey, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think, yes. So yeah, expanding on this project isn't just the 4 individuals who have joined us today. It is an expansive project, and I think you've touched on so many of the elements that are included in this project. So just one thing, because this is such an expansive team, why is that necessary? Why does it take so many people to work on one body?
Okay, that's a good question. So number one is, when we look at the Guru Granth Sahib itself, the part or the text of the Guru Granth Sahib has multi-dimensional aspects. Number two, this, as Harinder Singh had just explained, the project, we had the idea and we have the goal that we are going to look at multi-dimensions of the Guru Granth Sahib. So majorly speaking, we have 3 major parts while we do research. First is the research part, in which we look at the word meanings, we look at the etymology of each word, we look at the grammatical functions of each word. And the part 2 is translations. So taking into the considerations of the word meaning, of the grammatical functions of each word and the etymology part, Then we start working on the translation. So first is we make a literal translation. Then after the literal translation, we try to expand it, and that is what we call interpretive translation. And the third very interesting part is of dimensions. So we have included so far 3 major dimensions, beginning with history, which brings in the background and the culture of this particular Shabad or the Bani, that the Bani was composed in during the time. And number 2 is the musical aspect, the musical dimension. Like, for example, we are talking of Asa Kivar. So Asa is a name of a rag. So then we look at the Asami music, he explores, he has his research on what is this Asa and how this rag Asa has been used throughout Guru Granth Sahib, what's its nature, what's its meaning, and so on. And thirdly, we bring in the dimension of poetics. We all know the entire Bani of Guru Granth Sahib is composed in poetical language, we call it, which is full of emotions, full of imagery, full of metaphors, full of various other techniques and the elements of aesthetics, poetics, and so on. So this SME poetics work is, after the translations and after everything is ready for him, the draft is ready. So he is going to look at the whole draft and look at the particular Shabad or the slok or the Pauri and tell us, or rather, come up with what are the poetical beauties that we can explore, that we can appreciate out of that, the draft that we have before us. So this is, in brief, the process we continue. But this is like, when the first draft is created, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of research, a lot of contemplation, a lot of discussions among one-to-one SMEs and with the content lead or with the editors, with the reviewers. And when the first draft is ready, the draft is sent for reviewing. So at least we have 2 rounds of reviews where we have some suggestions to make, we improve on the draft, and we have some additions, we include some more references or the footnotes wherever required. And then once the reviewing phase is over, the draft in Punjabi, we do every research, the first draft is prepared in Punjabi. So this then is sent for Punjabi editing. So the editor, Punjabi language editor, he looks into the nitty-gritty of Punjabi, of how you can make it more simpler, more cohesive, and more flowing, so that it makes the reader interesting when he reads and he understands the idea better. So this is how the draft in Punjabi is in a way prepared. And once it is, we see it's good to go. So then this is handed over to the English team. And English team begins with, again, translating the whole document, the draft, into English. And then it goes to the level 2 for transcreation. Then it goes further for reviewing, for language check, and finally, English editing. And during this whole process, again, there might be some variations, some modifications, some additions, which we need to make in the Punjabi draft as well. So after, this English draft is ready, we look at the Punjabi, where we need to make some more additions, fine-tunings, and so on. So this is a huge and very long process of when a particular one Shabad, gets fully drafted and, you can say, ready for publishing.
Yes, thank you for that insight. I think that definitely even expands on how expansive this project is. Some background information as I was listening to you. That's a lot of work, and it's very appreciated. And before maybe we move on to the English part of this project, I'd also like to ask you about what the importance of like the meaning, the grammar, etymology. Why is that important to include? Because as I've engaged with a couple of
I think that's a great question. Yeah. So, I mean, when you have to look at the text, we need to remember the text of the Guru Granth Sahib, the part of the Guru Granth Sahib. We call it Turki Bani. It's a real text. It's a sacred text in a way. So, but the text the part of the Guru Granth Sahib is composed around 500 years before, from the time we are living now. So it's a text of, you can say, medieval period, 500 to rather 800 years back. So it's like you have to go back to that period to appreciate the language which is being spoken and which the contributors of Gurbani have employed to compose these Gurbani Shabads and the compositions. And every language had its way of, compositions, way of writing. We can call it grammatical construction. We can call it linguistic construction. So it is very important, you are aware of the language, you are aware of the system that the language employs, like the grammatical nuances and kind of things. And because the Gurbani is in a poetical language, so while you are working on translation kind of things, you must be aware of the elements of poetics as well. And also each and every Shabad you see, has been revealed, has been composed during a particular time or place. So you also have to look at, what might be the historical context of that particular Shabad, what might be, the cultural dimension of this particular Shabad. As Jasleen was just telling, when we look at the Banis like Kuchajji, Suchajji, it's very important. And we come across the words like Sohagan, Duhagan. It's very important that you are aware of the culture where these words were very common, they have been used, and then they are employed in Gurbani to convey the message, that the Gurus wanted us to look at. So this is how, it's very important, that you have people, those who are aware of these things, or in a way have some sort of expertise. So, we have in a team very people from different aspects, from different fields, like one from linguistics, one who has some expertise in Gurbani's grammar, and one who is aware of the poetics of Guru Granth Sahib, one who has expertise in history, one from poetics, one from music, and one who has, knows the art and the understanding of how to translate a text, taking into consideration all these elements, so that we can keep the translation as close to the text, to the sacred text of Guru Granth Sahib, to the revealed text of Guru Granth Sahib as possible. And also we can make it, so simple and easy for the readership. Once they read, they do understand its nitty-gritties, they do understand its meaning, they do understand, and not just understand, they appreciate, and they are able to apply the messages which are being revealed through these banis and these Shabads.
So yeah, narrowing in maybe on the culture and the historical background, I'm going to move into the English team that is at work. So one of our English team members, Ishmeet Kaur, something wonderful that you brought up in kind of our chat before this webinar was the interactions of languages and cultures, not just through this project, but within the Guru Granth Sahib itself. So not only does the Guru Granth Sahib engage various languages, cultures, and traditions, but now it's interacting and connecting with new cultures and languages. So how do these cultures and languages interact with the Guru Granth Sahib, both then, now, and then, as you pointed out, how is it presently interacting with a global language?
Thank you, Manvinder. I think that's a very important question, of course, and all of us will agree with the fact that all of us share a relationship with our language, be it the mother tongue or where we have, grown up, and the language that we know. So we all share a very intense relationship with that language. And so language is very close to culture, because language is what registers the culture. And interestingly, the Gurus have offered us a very rich culture through Gurmukhi in Guru Granth Sahib. And when we look at this culture which the Gurus are offering, there is a sense of history, there is a sense of society, there is a sense of belonging to where you belong to, in the sense of land, nature, space, also time, and also across genres. So, there's a text which is offering you multiple aspects of it. It's written in poetry. It can be sung, it can be interpreted, and it's rich. It's opulent in that sense. So there's a connect, which translation makes possible. So what actually translation does, it enables two different languages of different cultures to interact with each other and to know about each other. And I think that is why a lot of people are wary of translation, but translation in itself is a very beautiful process. It's both beautiful, it's both painful. It's beautiful and painful both. It's beautiful because when you're able to translate your own unique nuances into the targeted language, you're able to communicate and you're able to connect. It's painful when the phrases, the words, the sentences, the connections are missing, and you have to address an audience perhaps who is not aware of your own cultural nuances. But then there is also joy in that pain, because when you connect to people, it becomes a very joyful process. And something very important, like a personal influence of Gurbani on all of us is what is exactly that Gurbani offers us. So I like to give an example when I'm talking about this translation process and how translation is interacting with cultures and languages. There's a concept of, and very much in Asa Ki War, the project which is complete, the Bani which has been completely translated, there is a concept of Pao, Vismad, and Anand. So Pao would literally mean fear, or something which takes you towards something which is scary. But Pao in Asa Ki War is the perfect order, under which everything works. So under the command of Ikyonkar, everything works in that perfect order, and that functioning in the perfect order is called Pao. So it is not that scare within me, or it is not that fear within me that pushes me back. It's rather something that connects me, and this feeling, when the sun rises in its time, and then when the flowers bloom. When I look at this, there is a sense of sublime beauty, and that sublime beauty has been described as vismad. The sense of amazement, the sense of wonder, one is lost in it. You look at a flower, a white flower, and then you have a feeling that, oh, that flower will never get dirty. It's right there on the street, which is highly polluted, but then it shines. How is that happening? And that kind of generates the sense of wonder in you. And from this sense of wonder, we enter into a state which is of eternal bliss, the spiritual bliss, the state of Anand, where everything is nothing but that eternal happiness which can never be roped away from you. So when you have this kind of a rich culture, and when we read Gurbani, it comes to us the sense of place, the sense of land, the sense of seasons, nature, birds, flora, fauna, everything. You are associated to it. And so it is offering a very, very rich culture to the place you belong. And for a global audience, perhaps, who has not seen this, it is an exposure to that audience, and it's only possible through translation. And so what is translation actually offering is also enabling you to share that heritage which you have, and have it as a combined kind of a sharing with the world around you. And it enables you to cross those dimensions of those barriers of time. And the very reason that Gurbani, everything in Gurbani is around such, it is around truth. So this idea of such, enables you to cross these barriers of time, cross the barriers of perhaps borders, languages in itself, perhaps also the genres, and that is where it becomes a very beautiful process.
Thank you. I appreciated that answer so much. That definitely makes the interactions between cultures and languages and history and our contemporary moment so much more accessible. And I really appreciated that example. So in this, as this project, throughout this project, I saw the word transcreation being invoked. And that's not something I've engaged with before. I didn't know what a transcreation was before I explored the Guru Granth Sahib Project. So Ishmeet Kaur, if you could, give us a little bit of insight on what transcreation is and how it differs from translation.
Yeah, great question. So translation is more about like finding words to replace the words from one language to another, kind of mapping it out. Whereas like transcreation is more about trying to convey like this, like we say often, like the spirit of Bani, like the spirit of these lines, the wider sort of message, and then where it's necessary, offering some kind of contextualization. So in the example that Ishmeet gave from Asakiwar, like in the literal translation, we use the word fear because that's the literal translation. But in the transcreation, we have the ability to sort of explain that by using different word choices. So we had discussions about it, and we thought, okay, well, reverence is a kind of sort of combination of like fear and like respect and love all kind of tied into one. It's not about being scared of someone. And so, we are having these discussions about like, what is the thing that is being conveyed, or from our best understanding, what is the message that we think is trying to be conveyed, and like, how do we honor that message instead of just like trying to map things out from like the original into the Panjabi into the English. And there are certain words that we've discussed that like in English maybe don't mean the same thing as they mean in Panjabi, because words have layered meanings. And something like and I just spoke about, I think a couple of days ago, was this idea of like pleasing. We're working on Barama, and like this word pleasing comes so much. And there are certain moments where I think in English that becomes a more kind of, not like transactional, but this is kind of like a casual way to say it, but I told him in the meeting, like, it makes me think of like a jester trying to like please a king. And there's moments where that like doesn't really make sense in the context of the Bani. And like, there's a moment where it says like, when the virtues of Prabhu are pleasing to the human bride, right? Then Prabhu becomes pleasing to the human bride. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. That makes it sound like we're like owed some kind of, I don't know, entertainment or something to make us like want to sing these virtues, right? And so another word that we had in the word definitions was endearing or dear. And so it's really like when those virtues mean something to the human bride, to the seeker, that's when like Prabhu becomes this like object of their affection, right? Prabhu becomes endearing. Ikonkar becomes endearing. So something, I think with transcreation, we have the ability to like further explain those ideas without going way into commentary, because we also are offering commentaries, but offering some more context into these terms, especially for I was going to say diaspora Sikhs, but I think a lot of people are removed from what Ishmeet was saying about like land and certain metaphors, and so we get to sort of transcreate those emotions and transcreate the spirit of those lines in a way that isn't so strictly about mapping things out. And one other thing I wanted to point out, and this isn't really about transcreation, but it's also about like the importance of footnotes. And so there's so many terms that like maybe the Panjabi team has offered footnotes for on some level, but then in English we need more contextualization because there's not as much sort of transfer of context knowledge, I guess, if I can say that. And so an example we had in Kucheji was the like metaphor of the mango grove, and the like seeker says that she like sees these sohagins, these fortunate brides, these connected seekers who are sitting in the shade of the mango tree. And me reading that in my like context, sitting in the suburbs of Maryland, I'm like, okay, a mango tree has big leaves and you sit under it and it feels nice and it's hot outside. So, but when we talked about it more, it's about this idea of like burning in longing, right? And the Kujaji is burning and longing. She's so vulnerable and she's so, she just wants to feel connected, but it's like burning up inside of her. And she's seeing those who have had that union, those who've had that connection, and they're kind of able to exhale in the like coolness. Their burning has kind of been cooled down. They've been satiated. And I wouldn't have had that knowledge if it weren't for like a little footnote. And I know that like not everybody is going to read these things and click on every footnote, but being able to contextualize and offer that to those who want to interact on that level or in that depth is a really important thing. And I think that both the transcreation and the footnotes offer that additional sort of like context and understanding that maybe doesn't always come from literally mapping the original Gurmukhi into the English.
Yeah, thank you. I think, yeah, just having the option to read the footnote for those who will engage, I think is great. Because I think even as I'm going through text sometimes for non-academic purposes, I maybe won't read the footnotes, but then when I have to, put it into a space where it will be engaged with by other people, that footnote is always so helpful. Yes, I appreciate that example. So maybe just one thing, narrowing into previous translations, I'd like to take a little bit of time to talk about different schools of thought in regards to translations. What are those schools of thought? How does this translation engage with those schools of thought? And when there's disagreement, particularly, how is that reconciled or how is that dealt with?
So the first question you have asked is, what are the school of thoughts? As I think Ishmeet was saying, do we need a translation? I mean, some people think we don't need. So first school comes from the idea that because Gurbani is a Turki Bani, is a revealed text, and maybe none of us is able to translate it in the way it should be. So maybe we don't need to try that. We don't need to translate it. And so as also the quote goes, scripture translates scripture. So that was the idea. That is one of the schools, that which was of the opinion that if at all you need to understand a scripture or the Gurbani, you need to read it. You need to yourself, reflect on it by reading it. And maybe from within the Gurbani, you need to find some examples find some other shabds which help you to explain the Bani itself. So we saw, in the Sikh Panth also for years, for decades in the beginning, there was no such translation or there was no such need felt that there need to be a translation of Gurbani. And then we see Pai Gurdas. Pai Gurdas, Wara are, like we say, loosely speaking, they give a very beautiful explanation of some of the shabds of Gurbani. So Dr. Tarun Singh, one of the scholars of Sikhi, of Gurbani, who has worked on Guru Granth Sahib and the things that we are talking today, he has listed about 7 schools of thoughts. So he mentioned these 2. First one he calls is a Sahaj Pranali, where it's but natural that when you read Gurbani, you understand it. And if at all you need it, look into this Shabad, look at another Shabad, maybe you are able to understand by so doing. And the second one he calls Pai Pranali, that is Pai Gurdas, which definitely, helps you to understand some of the concepts of Gurbani, also some of the terms, some of the shabads. Like, for example, when we were working on Asakiwa, so the first word that we begin with, or the Guru Granth Sahib begins with, Ik Oankar. So we were looking into Oankar and we saw, this word Oankar is explained by various scholars and people differently. And when we came across a beautiful talk, there are many verses on Oankar. So Pai Gurdas has explained it so beautifully and so nicely. And who can be better than him? who was himself a contemporary of the Gurus and who had this opportunity of scribing the first a copy of Guru Granth Sahib we called Adi Granth in 1604, sitting near the fifth Guru Sahib, Guru Arjan Sahib. So he has explained this, the concept of Nirankar, Ekankar, and Omkar so nicely that, that there is, we all know Ekankar, or we all know the divine is formless. So he says, of course, that's the first stage, formless, Nirankar. And then when Nirankar, wills to expand into the creation, so he takes a form that he calls Ekankar. So from Nirankar, he takes a form called Ekankar, and from Ekankar, he manifests into this creation, which is called Omkar. So looking at, so like this, Bhai Gurdas, some of the Shabas help us to understand Guru Granth Sahib Gurbani, which Dr. Taran Singh called as, Pai Pranali. So with the help of the secondary sources like Bhai Gurdas, you can understand Gurbani. Then from there on, we see, and there are multiple translations, multiple efforts made to translate Guru Granth Sahib, and all those efforts, those schools of thoughts, we can categorize them into, or we can club them into two, though he has mentioned them differently, but for our purposes today and for understanding them in a brief, I can at least club them into two. So the first one we can club, or we can name is like traditional school of thought, which Dr. Taran Singh has said about the Paramaarth Pranali, Udasi Pranali, Nirmala Pranali, and ending up with this called Gyani Pranali or the Sampradaya Pranali. So they all come up under one category called traditional Pranali, which means that they are more inclined towards the tradition. What the tradition is saying, or what is being received from their predecessors, from their ancestors, because in those times there were no such privileges that you have to note down everything into the notebooks, the copies. It was just heard and remembered by heart and passed on to the next generation. So they're more inclined to what they heard from their ancestors, from the people that they took learning of Guru Granth Sahib, or they learned how to read Guru Granth Sahib. And we can call, of this school of thought, the major work that has been produced and was published, about, we can say, more than 100 years before. And we can call it the first Tika, a complete Tika, the first complete translation of Guru Granth Sahib in Panjabi, called Faridkot Tika, where, a lot of scholars got together, and they, with a lot of effort, with a lot of diligence, came up with first such endeavor where they translated the entire Guru Granth Sahib into Punjabi. Later on, after this, we have so many other scholars coming up with their own translations in Punjabi, in English, and in both the Punjabi and English together, like Manmohan Singh. So we can club all these the scholars, all these translations into the second category that we can call non-traditional or modern in approach, because most of them are coming from some education systems, some scholarly backgrounds, and this was a transitional period, from tradition to modernization. The India and like other countries, other countries of the world is being used by the British and so on. There is education, their school system, their university systems, and we can see that beginning from Bhai Veer Singh, and then Principal Teja Singh, his great work called Shabdarth, and then later on Professor Sahib Singh, Sri Guru Granth Sahib Darpan. And in English, if we have to speak, we can call, the first Tika has been done by Dr. Gopal Singh. So all these are a bit, we can say, non-traditional in approach, or rather you can say they are also keeping tradition in consideration, but they are also looking at the other elements like linguistics. Like Professor Sahib Singh is more oriented towards the grammatical construction of the text. So these are the different schools of thought, that we have seen, which Dr. Taran Singh has listed, numbered them into 7. The 8th one he called, are the miscellaneous work which has been done and which are being done, but which cannot be called like complete translations. Okay, your second question, you said, how do we engage with different schools of thought? This is really a very good question. So I think, it's a little easy for us to engage with these different schools for two reasons. Number one, our team comprises of diverse people, as there are diverse fields that we are looking into, diverse dimensions. So we have people from different, in a way, different systems coming up from, not just from different states, not just from different parts of the world, rather the people, those who are coming from, like those who have also had some knowledge of the tradition, along with having a university education, university degree, and so on. Number one. Number two is that not just a team, and I'm glad to say this and share this with you. Our entire team, each member of our team, has a very unbiased approach towards all these schools of thoughts. And I would also like to assert, and this is another beautiful thing that I realize, that not just a team which is working on the Guru Granth Sahib Project, rather the Sikh Research Institute also has such an unbiased approach. We consider that all these efforts, all these sources, all these translations, whether they are coming from a tradition or non-traditional group or school of thought, for us, they together, collectively, they are source of our panth. And looking at them together, without any bias, that we don't want to consider this or we don't want to consider that, we look into all these sources because we know all of them have great potentials, but they also have limitations. So once you appreciate both, and then you are aware of where the limitations are and where their potentials are. So this, I think, helps us to engage with these different schools in a better way. And this also helps us to incorporate those understandings, the potentials that they have into our own project. The third question that you ask, when there are different opinions, definitely, I mean, when you're working on such a big project and when there are so many people working in a team, and when you are referring to so many different schools of thoughts, so you are bound to have different opinions, when looking at different shabals or maybe a particular word or a phrase or kind of thing. Number one, I would like to say that we have not many different opinions. The reason being because we are looking at very comprehensively all the required tools which you need to understand the text, the original text, and also, to the language that you need to translate it. Because we have a multi-dimensional, having people, multi-expertise in a team. So there are lesser, and because we are also looking at each and every part of it. We are not just looking at the linguistics or the grammar or the poetics. We are looking all those parts which are required. We are referring to consulting all those tools. So this minimizes a difference of opinion, but still there are different opinions. So what do we do is, same, we reconsider our views, we reflect on them again, we discuss among our team, and we try to build a consensus. Where it is not possible, we are very, of the opinion, and that's what we do, and that's what is a part of a process, that we will include both of those different views or the opinions into whether it is translation or in the form of a footnote. So we do refer to that on this, we have a different opinion, we have a different view. Even sometimes we agree to a particular view, still we find this another view given by maybe Professor Sahib Singh, by Veer Singh, or even by the Tika Freelco. To us, it looks like, hey, that's great, that's really something, a very different approach to this same idea or the same translation. So we do endorse and we do include that as additional information for the reader in a footnote. So this is how it makes for us easy to engage with these schools and also to overcome where do we have different opinions.
Hi, I wanted to take a quick little break to let you know about a few things. You can look at upcoming webinars on our website at sikri.org, and while you're there, please consider becoming a donor. It's with the help from our audiences that the team at Sikri is able to continue exploring Sikh knowledge and illuminating the voices in the community. Or consider becoming a supporter of the Sikhcast by clicking on support on our anchor.fm page. However, this podcast is free to all, so if you do like the show, tell some of your friends and family about us. With that out of the way, let's get back to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, so now that we've understood how the team potentially interacts with discrepancies from external translations or other translations that have been done, Harinder Singh, I'm going to pose this question to you. Thank you for your patience. This is quite a large team that's working on this project. Previous translations, from my understanding, haven't engaged with such large teams, and therefore, because of how many people are working on this project, there are bound to be differences or disagreements that arise. I know it is an internal process, so if you're comfortable sharing, and to the rest of the panelists, I'm happy to let you engage as well. But Harinder Singh, yeah, we'd love to get a little glimpse into the internal working. So when there's a discrepancy or disagreement internally, how is that engaged with?
Sure. We are actually quite open about our process in the website, which there's an area called project. And if you look under the approach and process, it answers the kind of considerations we work on weekly basis. And they're quite detailed for those who want to know, but let me put it in perspective. What does this really mean? So the work which goes into the research allows for what Dr. Kaur and Jasleen Kaur were talking about, to be able to go to the level of translations and transcreations and interpretations. And that research part, sometimes we can't find the etymology of a word because people just assume certain things. Sometimes it takes 2 hours to do one word, and sometimes it takes more than a week to do one word. And I want to dwell on it, that our job is to really present the data. And then if that is comprehensively done, then we are presenting one literal interpretation, one transcreation, and one commentary, with the hope that many others will create their own translations, their own commentaries, but they are based on something. This is what the epistemology is like. People ask, how do you know what you know? So we want people to form opinions based on some research. And this is where work goes. Just to put in perspective, as of last week, this team has grown from one-person team to now there are 20 people working just on the content. And as of last week, we are spending on one Shabad, whatever Shabad means to you right now, of Guru Granth Sahib, 384 hours. Just think about that for a second. Almost 400 hours are being spent in being as thorough and meticulous. Because look, Guru Granth Sahib itself, yes, it is Guru, yes, it's perfection, but think it's a documentation. And Gurus have created this tradition of documenting their experience and wisdom, which we can learn from and the world can benefit from. What we are trying to do is, can we document as much as possible the collective knowledges and add to it where we can provide a better context? So that's our work. I hope you can see the responsibility of this, doing this with integrity while having our own sort of disagreements. So in this context, 20 people trying to collaborate and curate throughout the globe, Punjabis and non-Punjabis, where some have Punjabi as their first language and some don't, and various schools of interpretations are being considered. I'll give you one example. Within Asa Ki War, within a very early stage, after we even developed the process, this is why it's evolving. And we are open to this evolution and more criticisms and more adding to this. Very quick, soon we face the word Taram. So Taram, you look up in dictionaries, and all of your viewers probably also can relate to it. Is it religion? Is it righteousness? Is it duty? All these things are invoked all the time. Then when we bring into the context of Guru Granth Sahib, is it just referring to whatever Taram is, those words? or is also referring to an individual in Indology or in mythology called Dharamraj. So this is where the work comes in. This is why we need the data. What are all the possible meanings of this? Then providing the context to it. And even after all that, is this really the word which we end up saying at the time is, this is really about the principle, or is it really about the individual who is considered the deliverer of justice? So if we had a disagreement on it, we kept talking about it because there are assumptions, based on the knowledges of individual. And then we are saying, well, okay, this is your assumption. But if somebody is reading this sitting in Alaska and they don't have this knowledge, how can we make sense for them? Or somebody who is even born as a second generation or even first generation in Punjab, who has no knowledge of this and is not aware of Indian thoughts, how do we make sense for them even in Punjabi? So we work on those elements. This is why, and we agree to disagree, but that has happened very rarely so far. Our first work is to develop the consensus. And then if it's not possible, which has happened in few instances, we write the complete details as they were being talked about. And then, I'll just add one couple more things. Like you heard from Dr. Kaur earlier, the word paw, which in Asaki var in that body becomes pa. So there are variations of the word as well. So we are also presenting those variations. So the project word where we started this conversation is about different audience needs different things. Can we create a comprehensive documentation at minimum and add to it so those who are looking for particular dimensions, particular elements, particular learnings, particular ways to interpret it for themselves, eventually this is about making the experience richer, making the experience open, transparent, and that's what we are about.
So I do have a follow-up question that came to me as you were speaking, and I was relating it to my own experience, which I'm not saying is the same at all in the process of the Guru Granth Sahib Project, but because there is so much to consider and there are so many people on the team and you are trying to get the complete details and you are including all of the footnotes, all of the context, is there maybe boundary isn't the correct word, but is there like a stopping point where you're like, I have read too much, I can't read everything, so I need to put a stop somewhere? Is there a point where is that point ever reached? And how is that kind of dealt with?
So thanks for asking that. We reached that point and then we pushed it further. Then we go to the next version. This is where we are currently. We said, here is our version 1 release scope. This is where I'm going to bring in, how you release versions of like on your iPhones, on your Android phones, or whatever else you use. So we are saying this is our version 1 scope. Yes, it is still not fully satisfactory. We have not covered everything. So we have now defined scopes at each level, and we are sticking to completing them to that level. That's the minimum we are doing right now, which essentially means we are giving those 3 elements in research. We are giving 2 meanings, which means translation and transcreation in English. We are also providing commentary, and we are also giving minimum 3 dimensions. We would like to do more. Our hope is if we can figure out how to do this, as I'm saying, it's taking almost 400 hours to do 1 shabad. And if I create the equivalency of that, that's almost 10 full-time people, because not all 20 people in content are full-time right now because of the resources and other issues. The way it's being managed is, let's say we are able to do this in 20 years. And I don't know, I cannot project right now. We have great advisors on this project who are telling us how to deal with the complexities of this and different schools of thoughts and the new schools of thoughts which are emerging as well, because we are interacting in 2020 now, given all these traditional sources, as well as academic sources, as well as what I would say, not just traditional or non-traditional sources. There are more resources we have discovered even when the traditionalists didn't have, because they didn't have access to certain dictionaries or other understandings of the periods of the time from other languages as well. So we are actually integrating all those, and we have agreed to do version controls. And let's say if we finish this in 20 years, as we grow and scale this, then we will restart. This is the idea. The data part should be completed, the research, and translations and transcreations and commentary, they should be done every few years, because the language is changing, the culture is changing, the idiom is changing, and they have to be done and redone. This is what Professor Puran Singh says. This is what Gurbani itself says. कि जे साहिब मेरा नीत नवा. Even today, when I read the hukum from Darbar Sahib, it's so clear. If you don't explain ki Amyo, what is Amyo, what is Amrit, what is the pool of Amrit, if you don't explain what is the lotus feet, and this is why this work is needed. It has to be redone every few years. It needs to be a continuous process, but at least let's create a data behind it so it can be facilitated at a better rate, a faster rate, so more people can do it.
Mhm. Thank you. I think the ongoing aspect was very helpful for me, because otherwise it felt very overwhelming. But I think, yeah, the being kind to yourself and continuously engaging with it, I think, is helpful in my understanding. So before we move into questions from the audience, I would encourage everyone who is tuning in right now to send their questions in. I'll throw my last question to Dr. Ishmeet Kaur. So an element we haven't really touched on is the tonality, the non-cognitive elements of this translation, this transcreation. So yeah, I'd love it if you could share a little bit on the tonality and capturing these non-cognitive elements. So by that I mean the beauty, the music, the poetics, and the aesthetics in this translation and transcreation.
Thank you, Harinder. I'll actually pick up from where Jaswanji and Harinder Singh have just left. In fact, I would like to add one thing, saying that, we look at it as a translation of this century, because there have been other translations, we know about them, and those translations have come up, maybe some by individuals, some by teams. And over years, we've seen a lot of change happening in time. And last two centuries, there has been a massive change in, almost everything, so many social movements, involvement of people on the ground, and how does this translation actually become relevant to them. So I look at it as a translation of this century, and maybe creating a database for many new translations to come over many hundreds of years, and maybe people will come to us and look at what we have created, and then of course critique it, and be positive about it or be negative about it. And in this entire process, something which is extremely important, and now I'm coming to your question, is involving the reader in what we are doing. And this reader response is something which is extremely important. So when I look at Gurbani, Gurbani is much ahead of time, and when I say this, I say it particularly keeping in mind the caste question. When today there's a huge Dalit movement, gurus have already, started in a way a revolution. So the inclusion of the Bhagats and their voices in itself, are equally relevant even today. And a lot of people go back to Guru Granth Sahib to read those voices and bring them in the contemporary forums today. Similarly, so the question of the woman is very important, and how is the woman depicted in Gurbani? Are we as readers, and I'm not talking of myself as a person in the team, but I am now locating myself outside this team, and I'm saying, as a reader, can I associate to that essence of Gurbani? As a woman, when I read Gurbani, does it really become meaningful for me? And the translation which is offered to me, where I'm trying to understand, Gurmukhi and Gurbani, is that offering me what the gurus actually said? So that's a very important question which we all need to ask ourselves. And the moment, like Jasleen said, as a child, she looked at it and she thought it was not for her. So where do you as a reader, put yourself in this engagement with Gurbani? So when we look at, and now I come back as a team member, and when towards the end the final draft comes, so we do a quick run looking at, actually not a quick run, a detailed run looking at, the Shabad, and trying to look at the beauty of the Shabad in terms of orality, in terms of the connect with the sound that every word is being offered, in Gurbani, in Gurmukhi, and also in terms of certain figures of speeches, in terms of rhyme, rhythm, these kinds of dimensions which of poetry often has. And we try to look at it, and then we try to see that, are we being able to retain even some aspects of it, within our final, English final, still in the making. It's not never final, but in whatever we are offering as version 1, are we being able to retain some aspects of it? And that is where this translation also becomes very unique, because if we are not able to retain the sound, or if we are not able to retain alliteration or figures of speech, one thing which we definitely try to engage with is the mood or the fervor of the poem, the fervor of the verse, the fervor of the Shabad. That is where we try. So if it's written in this mood of love, when the reader reads it, even in the targeted language, the reader should be able to engage, with that intensity of love. So if there's a pain of separation, the reader should be able to feel that pain of separation. So if there is this joy of union, finally when you meet Kyunkar and there is joy of union, the reader should be able to get that, mood of that joy. And in this entire thing, one learning which came to me personally was, the way the woman-man question had been dealt with in all, the earlier, in major earlier, not just translations, but commentaries and, other literatures available, was that, the man often was dominating to the woman. The patriarchal masculinity was always prevalent. But when we come to Gurbani and when we read it today, in this, and keeping this woman question in mind, there's something else that happens. It offers you a space to merge, with, the divine husband. And if it's the power equation, this merging will not be possible. So this liberation is what, we seek to make available in this. I hope we are successful. It's a very difficult task which we have taken on ourselves. But this beauty, because the whole culture is of grahast ashram, of family, of life, of living together, and where do you place this beautiful relationship, of man and woman? And it does not just come in the material sense of husband and wife, but it comes in the sense of the soul bride and, the divine husband. And summing up with, precisely your question is, the mood that we try to offer, addresses the beauty of the verse. But many a times we are also able to retain certain poetic nuances. So there is, of course, like I said earlier, there is loss in translation. So there is pain in translation, and of course there is also gain in translation. Gain is very less, pain is much more.
Thank you. So building on that, the aspect of gender that you brought up, a question that I think Jasleen touched on a little bit at the beginning was the usage of the God, the Lord, the He. So Jasleen, I will give this question to you, and I invite the other panelists to hop in as well. What has this been replaced with, and why has it been replaced? Yeah, so what has it been replaced with, why, and how was this decision made?
Actually, I think we need to go back right to the beginning of the Guru Granth Sahib itself, because it begins with Ikyunkar. And the definition of Ikyunkar has been provided in the Mool Mantra. So I'm not going to say all aspects of it, but one thing which we do derive from it is that we need to, right in the beginning, we need to understand that Ikyunkar is without gender. Gender rahit, gender rahit. There is no gender. Ikyunkar is formless, and therefore there is no gender. So whenever there are references to certain shabads where it has been said ki ek ko hi purakh hai, there is purakh ek hai, there is one man, it's not actually that man. It's metaphoric being used there. And so the moment we say that, Ikyunkar is he, it's a totally wrong assumption which we are working on, right? So we need to understand, that Ikyunkar is without genders, and therefore the team decided to retain Ikyunkar as Ikyunkar itself and not to use any pronoun when we are referring to Ikyunkar. And perhaps some other equivalents in other languages were also not sufficient to replace the word Ikyunkar itself, because it's a whole concept. It's not a simple word. So it was not possible to retain, or replace or have an equivalent from a different language for Ikyunkar. And with this, it was also, thought, one of the ideas which came forward was that let the world know the vocabulary which is being offered by Gurbani itself. Let the readers, who are engaging with Gurbani, be familiar with the nuances of Gurbani by retaining not just one word but many words, which are particular to the context. So this was, a larger thing, and then care has been taken also in. We all have referred to Kuchaji. Jasleen has talked about Kuchaji. Jaswanji has talked about Kuchaji. So words like Kuchaji, which are milder in Panjabi language, the moment they are translated into English, they become harsh or they become sometimes derogatory. So Kuchaji is not unskilled. It's just somebody who does not know the way of doing a particular thing. But the moment we replace it with unskilled, it becomes a bit harsh. So our challenge has been, how do we neutralize, how do we minimize, these kind of, difficulties that we engage with. And that is where the footnotes come in. And, maybe sometimes the comparative words, Kuchaji, Suchaji, Gunwanti, they tend to explore and engage with each other and then explain the right meaning with it. So there are many challenges, and but I hope we are able to retain this, woman sentiment, the feminine sentiment to call it, as we go ahead working with, because personally, I have not come across any of the works which has addressed, the understanding of Guru Granth Sahib by engaging with the woman perspective.
Yeah, so just looking to see some of the questions that are coming in from the audience. I will, just to be mindful of time, I'll throw the first one to Jaswant Singh. And this is, I think, a little bit more of a brief answer, but the languages within the Guru Granth Sahib requires experts in those languages. Do we have the expertise within those languages? Which I think we touched on a little bit.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, and I mean, as we have already spoken, that first thing that is required for a good translation is that you need to, or the translator needs to fully able to understand and appreciate and comprehend the language of the text, the Bani, of the Shabad, that he's going to translate into another language. And we all know the language of Guru Granth Sahib, the treasury of various languages and dialects spoken during the period of the Gurus and before them, which includes the words from Sanskrit, Persian, Pali, Prakrit, Apabhransh, and coming towards the Braj, Avadhi, and Puratan Punjabi, and so on. So that's a very good question, and definitely within our team, some of the members, they do have the understanding of Sanskrit, of Hindi, of Urdu, of Persian, and also some of the the language that I just mentioned too. Plus, because we refer to and we are in engagement with all the sources, new and the old, which are available on these different languages, on various dialects. So we do refer to those and we look into, and we have within our team the ability or the expertise in the people, those who can make sense of those languages and the words. So I think that really helps. to look at that linguistic part of the Guru Granth Sahib. And we were from the very beginning very convinced and very aware that this is one of the first and one of the primary tools that we need to develop and that we need to look into and we need to take into consideration.
Thank you.
Yes.
And another question that we have, I will give this one to Harinder Singh, and everyone else, please feel free to chime in. But they ask, some of the previous transcreations were done by Brahmgyanis who had reached a certain relationship with the Guru. Do we have access to these Brahmgyanis to check in with?
I'll answer that with the spirit, because I don't think we have a thermometer to measure who's a Brahmagyani. I'm just being completely honest. In the spirit of what is being said is people who lived a great Sikh life. So yes, we in fact spent, especially Jaswantveer here, going to what I call non-academic centers of where those individuals who have great experiences of Sikhi and see what is available from those deras or those systems or pranaliyan. Unfortunately, because a lot of it is not a written experience, but we do have, fortunately, we weren't able to get individuals to work on it. But the fortunate part is that within the team, we have people who have learned from those systems as well. So we do incorporate those from that angle. We don't get into the litmus test of whose experience is more supreme. We do know that there are individuals in Sikh tradition who are revered, and we revere them as well for what they have shared with us. And if we have a written form of that or a lower form of that, which we can refer to, even if it's written by someone else, we absolutely cite it and study it and incorporate it in the work we are doing. I want to connect one more thing. If you're interested in how we are doing all that, we are very open with that process again, and invite all of you to look at the project portion on our website. It shows our approach. It shows the team members who's doing which element and why they're doing that element because of their training. It also shows what bibliography we are using and the sources which connect the schools of thoughts we have been talking about, plus much more. And the dictionaries which otherwise haven't been consulted if they're referring to a particular language, because we are also showing in the research portion how the word is traveling in different languages as well. We don't get into which language came first, which is a very political issue for Indology included, but we definitely are looking at how the word is traveling historically in different languages, including the modern language.
So to, kind of put some of the questions that the audience is asking into more of one concise question, there's some wondering about what we hope or what the team hopes this project will accomplish. There's also a question along the lines of, will Guru Granth Sahib Project be available in an audiobook form or a video series so that it can be accessible to the youth and non-Sikhs? So Jasleen Kaur, I will throw this one to you. Not you, maybe you particularly, but what is the long-term goals or the hopes of this project?
Yeah, great question. I don't know about the audiobook question. Maybe Harinder Singh or Jaswant Singh can answer that one. But the larger goal that we have is to make Bani accessible globally. The message of Bani accessible. I think from a personal angle, I've sort of shared a little bit about how just working on this project has made that space that I felt was between me and Bani much smaller. And I think that there's a lot of people who feel that way. They're not just my age and they're not just living in the diaspora. And so having that accessibility, having the spirit of Bani accessible to people who are Sikh and non-Sikh, people who are just starting their journeys, and who are curious, to be able to go onto the website and engage with Bani at whatever level they feel like engaging with it on at that point in time. I think having that tool will change a lot of people's relationship, not just with their Sikhi journeys, but also with just like the world around them, processing their experiences as humans. I think, you know, like we have these commentaries that relate to like global perspectives. We try to explain things. And the hope is, and I know Ishmeet touched on this as well, like the hope is that given the sort of large database of like word etymologies that are also available within the project on the website, given all those tools, our hope is that like the next project won't have to do all that stuff from scratch, right? Like people can look at, we've had discussions about what is Sahaj? What does that mean? And for people who are maybe 100 years from now, hopefully it's sooner than that, but who are like trying to look at all the various translations and see how people have dealt with this word, hopefully we become a reference point as well. So it's not just about like, the hope is that people read the commentaries and read the translations and engage personally. It's also that in the more kind of nerdy technical side of things, that when the next project comes along, they have yet another resource to look at where they don't have to, you know, start all over on certain elements. Yeah, if anyone wants to add to that or answer the audiobook question.
Well, I can add a couple of things to it, and I think it'll be great if everyone else wants to chime in. So let me actually present another outcome which is possible out of all this. You know, one of the outcome possible is perhaps we can go back to becoming the Sikhs of the Guru rather than our own denominations and schools of thought. And I am hoping for that outcome is possible because what we're trying to do is bring in those elements, bring in the disruptions which Guru Nanak and the Guru period brought in terms of how one connects with the Koankar, regardless of their backgrounds. So in the last 100 or so years, and especially in last 20, 30 years, we have become, even within the community, that this is, I'm only from a Taxal school, or I'm only from the missionary school. Perhaps they need to look at each other's views a little bit more carefully and look at it more not as a bias or a disagreement, rather than this was the experience of the time based on their knowledges and based on their personal experiences. So we are not comparing and contrasting here, just to put in perspective. There are other websites who are doing this, other projects, which is great resource as well. We are trying to create a resource where we're trying to add to the knowledge transfer, add to the knowledges as well, with the hope that this will inspire people to really have their own personal journey and become a little bit more accepting as we used to be towards other Sikhs and other non-Sikhs as well. So that's one of the outcomes I'm hoping for. In terms of what can we add to this project, look, we have a long list, people are already telling us, and we keep saying that we are a research development project. We are not going to develop the best looking website, and we're not going to add audio file to everything because other websites have done good jobs of those. We are not trying to replicate things. We are not trying to do additive work at a small things. We have taken on something which, after visiting various scholars, including the SGPCs of the world, including the Sikh studies departments of the world, including the scholars, regardless of their schools of thoughts, and asking them to get involved. And we look for more people to get involved, but our purpose really is to come up with, in the best of our intentions, you know, I have a friend, let me actually use thing, and a colleague who says, my information is mile wide, but inch deep. Our hope is that we can also provide a mile deep information. That's what we are really after. And what you do with that information is between you and your guru, or you and whatever a Koankar means to you. We will be adding slowly to what we release in each versions, but primary work we have is a research work, and based on that research, providing one explanation which speaks to the audience, Punjabi audience, as well as one explanation which speaks to current English audience.
Yeah, I would invite Ishmeet Kaur, just on saying, if you would like to add anything, just to be mindful of time. We have about 5 minutes left. So if there was, any closing statements or thoughts that you'd like to add, I welcome those. Maybe we'll start with Jaswant Singh.
I think it's all good, and I would like to request the readership and the audience, those who are hearing this webinar and those who are aware of the Sikhis Guru Granth Sahib Project, that they should and they must go to the site, have a look, explore. I'm very hopeful and sure that you will have multiple things to look into, and that you will be interested and you will be motivated to, and you will be, um, look like, that they are very useful for you. Also, look on these things and provide us your feedback. Maybe it's a critique that you can do, but it has to be, it should be constructive. And looking at those feedback, those suggestions, they will help us as a team to look into the things that we are doing more deeply, more comprehensively, and definitely that will help us to make the project and make the content more powerful and more useful for the readers. Thank you.
Yeah, it's this has been a beautiful process. I know that we are not perfectionists, but there's a lot of scope of improvement. Like just Vanti said, that we need to have a feedback and a good feedback. As a feminist, if I may call myself so, I would say that I invite women to look at what we are doing, and maybe we will be able to make sense of a lot of metaphors which are being made, which are being used by gurus. And I do see a question which talks about how the concept of humankind as a soul bride is also propagating concept of male hierarchy. I think our challenge as trans creators and translators here is that how do we represent this in the right intent, and how do we answer this in context. So in context of Guru Nanak Sahib particularly, who uses this particularly in Barama. Guru Nanak Sahib himself is a male, and he is acquiring the attributes of a female. So if he is inquired and is acquiring these attributes of the female, and then talking about this pain of separation, with the divine husband, this metaphor is very much offered within Gurbani, but has it been done in the sense of patriarchy as we look at with the feminine lens today? I hope our translations will be able to neutralize this kind of a perspective which we have created. And I can only ask for blessings from everybody to so that we are able to finally come up to that. I think that's what I would like to say.
Thank you. Yes. So just to round this conversation up, I think Harinder Singh, sorry, do you have something that you'd like to add?
Yes, so I would basically say to the readers and the discussions you're seeing and the healthy tensions which we are confronting and trying to address, we would like the users to, especially on this idea of traditional explanations only, to not mansplain these things. And I know we have the tendency within the team as well as outside, and I'm acknowledging that. We need to understand what perspectives are being offered. We also need to understand that how do you make things complex free while addressing, addressing those issues which are not being addressed, especially in Sikh circles who are engaging with the Shabad to create a worldview which is based on Eko Onkar. So those are some of the outcomes we are working towards. But those are the outcomes which will be developed as people engage with Guru Granth Sahib itself. And the hope is, whether it's the Dalit issues, women issues, political issues, corruption of the religious right issues, that all of those can be addressed and tackled when we are equipped with this complex-free strength we get from Gurbani and the experience of the gurus, the contributors of the Guru Granth Sahib. So we invite you to come to that project, send us feedback on it, join the team. I want to share a great news that, I used to feel who's going to help us support this project. Where will we get the money? Where will we find the team members? I can tell you in less than 2 years, we're already at 20 people, and now we're getting more people who want to be part of the project. I can tell you we didn't even have $20,000 to start this with, but now we have 10 people who are equivalent full-time working on it, and people are supporting us financially. People are doing this because we have been very open in our process, in our approach, and where we are trying to go with this without any agendas. It's a very open project, hence the word project again. So I just want to share that with everyone, that sometimes we are only shown the negative news and what's affecting us as community, but there is a lot of positive news that the true legacy of the gurus we have is the Shabad itself. And how do we take care of that legacy? How do we make this legacy relevant to not just 30 million Sikhs, but also 7 billion people on this earth? That's the agenda.
Thank you. And I think this conversation was very helpful in understanding the immense amount of work that is going on, and like increasing that transparency that we've been discussing. And I think, the ongoing process, the conversations that are happening behind the scenes, but also overtly, can be accessed. I have also linked the website, the Guru Granth Sahib Project website, in the chat box. So if you'd like to take a look, please do so. Just to finish up and wrap up today's conversation, I'd like to thank all of our panelists today for joining us, and giving us a little glimpse into the work that they have been doing. Thank you again to everyone for joining in. Today's webinar will be ending now. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
You were listening to Sikhcast by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.